Well, welcome to the Idea2Launch show. My name is Lisa Zufall, and I am your host. And with me in studio today is a very special lady. Her name is Tahni Cullen, and she has written a book that I thought was absolutely inspiring and amazing, and I wanted to bring her on to talk a little bit more about it. Our show is about business and inspiration and motivation and all those things wrapped up in one. And how do you build your business and make it through, really, in this crazy world of ups and downs. So with that being said, I just want to welcome Tahni to the show. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you here. So I'm going to just do your intro, your bio here. Tahni Cullen is a people lover, marketer, writer, and conference speaker who brings a powerful message of hope and restoration. She recently co-authored the memoir about her journey with her young nonverbal son, Josiah's fire. Autism stole his words. I have the book right here. Autism stole his words. God gave him a voice. Tahni worked 13 years at a multi-campus church here in the Twin Cities, which we are both very familiar with. And where she served in the communication arts and as a ministry director. She and her producer husband, Joe, created an award-winning documentary called Surprised by Autism. They live with their son, Josiah, in St. Paul, where they enjoy exploring Minnesota museums and destinations. Is there like specific seasons where you enjoy the destinations?
Well, of course, fall is amazing.
Yes.
You know, we go to a lot of nature centers and nature trails and stuff like
Right.
that. But in the deep of winter,
Yes.
that's when we go to the inside places.
The museums.
So,
You have to.
Museum, Institute of Arts, Walker.
For those of you who have not been to Minnesota in the wintertime and don't enjoy 30 below, don't come until we thaw out.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's get on to your book. So a mutual friend of ours recommended this book to me, Josiah's Fire, because I was talking about my son who was diagnosed with autism and what we could do to help him and certain things to think about. And she just, over lunch, she said, you should read this book. It's called Josiah's Fire, and, you might get some tidbits out of it. You might, it might help. So I grabbed the book, bought it off of Amazon, and I read it within 2 days. I couldn't put it down.
Good.
The stories in here are so vivid. It's like I'm walking right next to you guys, and I'm part of the story. It's beautifully, beautifully written, and it's so powerful. So before we jump in and I talk about the Apple challenges, which, I've been dying to ask you about, we're going to talk about your story and how did this all happen? Because Josiah wasn't initially autistic. There was a trigger that happened, right?
Sure. Well, Josiah, first of all, we had been married for about 8 years, and we decided, hey, maybe it's time that we should, start a family. So we did everything that every young, couple thinks of doing,
Yeah.
So we moved from our townhouse, got our single family home, wanted to do our, have 2.3 kids and a dog and a picket fence and the whole
Right.
American dream sort of a thing. But, at that point we had become established in our careers, established in our church.
Yep.
Everything was going well for us. And that
Yeah.
way we wanted to make good decisions, so just get everything set up so that we could succeed and have a family.
That's
and
awesome.
So Josiah was born, and he was just perfect in every way. We named him Josiah because it means fire of the Lord. And so he liked that, and that's why the book is called Josiah's Fire. So, but anyway, he, was growing and meeting all of his medical milestones and sociable and happy and this curly-headed little, cute little sprite. And everything was going well until about 19, somewhere in between 19 and 22 months, there were little things that started changing. But especially at about 22 months, there was a period of 3 weeks where he stopped responding to his name. He started turning light switches on and off, and off. He started going to wheels like on the playground and just spinning and spinning and spinning. And I remember there was one day when I put my head underneath a blanket with him, and it was like his pilot light was out. He just was not looking at me. He wasn't responding to me. And it felt like we were losing him, and we were terrified.
Right.
And we didn't know what was happening. We didn't know why. And it was actually my husband's parents who very courageously had come out and mentioned to us that, hey, from the last time that we visited with Josiah, because they don't live in our town, there are some things that are just different. And we had heard about something called autism. And of course, as a mother, I'm just like, what? Because you watch for those things. You're reading parent magazines and you're like, oh, thank God my kid points. Oh, thank God my kid does. You look at these things.
Make sure that they're on track.
Exactly. And so anyway, they said, will you just, maybe look into it? And so I went to the pediatrician and, of course, I'm concerned. And the first thing the pediatrician says is, well, sometimes boys develop a little slower than girls and things like that. And so maybe we could wait about 6 months, see how it comes out. And something in my mommy gut was just like, or what's the other alternative?
Right.
And so very quickly, I got him into all sorts of like early childhood testing. And we did the whole gamut of tests for about 4 months. And finally, we found ourselves around a boardroom table with doctors sitting around after he'd had 2 days of medical testing. And, the thing is with autism, it's all behavioral, where they're trying to see like, well, what were the deficits with communication, behavior, socialization. There's no blood test or anything for it. So anyway, we're sitting around the table and they were giving us the results. The result that I already knew in my heart, but sitting there, we were given the folder, and I remember opening it up, and it said autism spectrum disorder, and there was a line that just stuck out to me. No known cause, no known cure, lifelong. Mm-hmm. And it was really in that moment that it felt like a gavel came down on our son's life, a verdict on our lives. And it was like, the dreams for his future, all of our dreams, it was like, it just got shattered in one moment. And even to the point where we're looking through the literature and it was already talking about like, you're going to need to get tracking devices so they don't wander into the water and drown or, talking about, thinking about group homes, it's like, my kid is 2 years old. Like, what do you mean? It was totally like being thrown into, people will say a different country, but it's a different zone. Atmosphere, completely. It is a different planet. But as a mother and as a Christ follower, this was the question that just burned inside of me. Mm-hmm. Where is hope when there is no hope?
Right.
How do I even pray for this? How do I even go forward with this? There's many things that happen in our lives that you kind of can go, that was a hard season or that was a difficult time.
Right.
I had to recover from that. I'm glad that's over. And you move forward. This is such a game changer for everybody.
Yep. And you talk about that in your book where you went to a retreat to try and, ground yourself and figure out, tell the audience about that a little bit, because it was like I was in the cabin with you, just like trying to hold your hand and let you know that it's going to be okay.
Sure. Well, let me just kind of fast forward a little bit. We got our son into all sorts of therapies, everything that you could possibly think of, 40 hours a week of therapy plus.
Right.
And, our desire was that, maybe he could be mainstreamed in school. Maybe he would start speaking. And there is kind of this window that they talk about, like, if you can do these things before the child turns like 5, then there's probably, a higher amount of hope, like this plasticity in the brain and all of these things, which they're finding these days that your mind can continue to change clear up into your adulthood.
Right.
So, but at the time, that was really what was talked about, is like early intervention is so important. Well, after throwing everything into this, we, at 5 years old, kind of got an addendum to that pronouncement, which was is nonverbal, will probably be among the 40% of kids with autism who will never speak, low functioning, and severe, because autism has a spectrum. It can be very mild or what's called high functioning to the more severe side, which it really has a lot of disabilities associated with sensory problems, sleeping problems, feeding problems, self-help skills, all of that. So we kind of got the full package. And so anyway, with the retreat, I really felt like I needed to get some soul care. So
how long between he was diagnosed to the time that you went to the retreat? And all this time you've been running and doing all these tests. And what did that do to your business? What did that do to your relationship with your husband?
Sure. Well, there's a couple of different kind of retreats that I go on in the book. So I'm not sure which one you're talking about just yet. There's one that I went out to California, and there's one that I was in a actual cabin a hermitage. So the cabin was after we had kind of this miraculous thing happen with Josiah, which we'll probably get to. And so that was about 5 years into the autism.
Okay.
5 or 6 years. Wow. It is after I had left my job.
Yeah.
And I was really like, where am I? Like, I felt like I was floating in midair, and like I didn't have any grounding. And so I had actually kind of been guided to find out about this place that is called Pachem Terrace that exists outside of the Twin Cities area.
Okay. Yeah,
and
I've never heard of it.
It literally is like, come get away in a hermitage. It's these little cabins where you're just alone with God for 3-4 days. And you can feel like your heart beating. Yeah, it's so quiet.
You explained it. It was like we were there with you, the way that you explained it.
But it was something because there was a big rocking chair that was sitting in front of a picture window. And the person who guided me, through like, okay, well, this is what to expect and all of these things. He said, one of the things that people really do in those rocking chairs is just cry, scream, whisper, shout, whatever you have to do, just rock it out. Just rock and rock and rock and rock.
Yeah.
And, it's amazing because after running and running and running for so long, with a diagnosis, and it doesn't have to be autism, it can be anything that's kind of especially like a chronic thing that doesn't go away.
Right.
That, and especially, too, if you're a caregiver to somebody else, and there are a lot of people that are caring for their older parents, for instance, but you're caring for everybody, but do you have time for yourself?
Right.
And there was something very profound about taking that time, that soul care in the quiet, in the silence, to just have to hear for yourself, God, are you here with me? I have to look into places that I've put on a shelf for a long time and just be cared for. And it's a scary proposition because I, especially at that time, was a very extroverted person. So to be alone for 3 days with no electricity and stuff.
You couldn't even have a cell phone. All you brought was the Bible, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So, and a journal.
I can't even imagine being somewhere for 4 days without my cell phone.
I really recommend it. But yes, it's scary.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay, you leave there. So what was the miraculous thing that happened with Josiah?
Okay,
the game changer.
Yeah, so the game changer. Things had gotten, where we're just trying everything. And, at this point, it's like I haven't even had a conversation with my son. They had turned to, instead of working on speech, working with picture communication. So, the best you get is like, I want pizza or something, pointing at pictures. Anyway, I had watched a documentary called A Mother's Courage, and it was in watching that documentary that I saw that there was a method that was being used for children that were looking much like my son, the nonverbal kind of severe type. And this mother had developed it, and she was working with them, and she was teaching these kids basically how to learn and to be educated and to spell and communicate by pointing at letters. And so I was like, oh my gosh, those kids look like my son. I've got to find out what this is.
Right.
And so I found out that there was a person that was trained in that lived, that had apprenticed and came back to live in Green Bay, Wisconsin.
Okay.
And so I took Josiah there, and it was there that our world began to open up. I mean, he was choosing things where, he was still pretty young at that point. He wasn't spelling yet, but he was choosing things where it's like we were able to see that he was in there, that he was listening, that he was taking things in. And she gave me a word that was so profound in changing my perspective. And she said this: assume age level intelligence. And I was like, but it's like he has the mind of a toddler. I mean, that's what we're always told.
Mm-hmm.
And she had talked about how many of these kids have age level intelligence. It's just the mechanism, the outflow is broken.
Yep.
Well, I started talking to him differently. I started engaging with him more. And so that was helpful to get this whole thing started. But anyway, about a year into using this method, all of a sudden we're sitting at the kitchen table, and we had made some progress, but it was like, up to that point he had only spelled like words like RED, red,
Mm-hmm.
And words that I had given him. So anyway, we're sitting at the kitchen table on a Saturday night, and I decided to do a lesson out of the children's Bible. And it was about how Jesus healed the blind man.
Yep.
And so opened up the book and read about how Jesus healed the blind man. And then I said, Josiah, Jesus healed the blind man. What did Jesus do? Did he HEAL heal the blind man, or did he PLAY play with the blind man? He ripped the paper in half, tap on heal, tap on play. He tapped on heal appropriately. And then we had some stencil boards with the letters, but also I had an iPad with an app on it that had the alphabet in alphabetical order in, kind of a keyboard that's alphabetical order basically on the screen. So we were kind of using both of those. And so anyway, I just, kind of positioned his hand so that he could touch on the iPad. And so I said, okay, let's spell heal. And he touches G. And I was like, oh, he's missing it. Then he touches O. I'm like, go? He goes on to spell his first ever independent sentence: God is a good gift giver.
That's amazing.
It was...
What did you do?
I thought I was on candid camera. I thought I was losing it. I thought I had cracked or something like that. I'm like, this cannot be real. So then I was like, Josiah, yes, God is a good gift giver, but like, how do you know that? That's not even something that I like went around saying, like he's repeating or something like that. Right. That was just something purely from him. And then I'm like, how do you know this? I start asking him more questions. He goes on and he spells, God is very capable. No, this all runs together, it's all, no spaces or anything in between, but I'm like, what is happening? So actually at that moment, I thought he's being like completely healed from this whole thing. That's not what happened at that moment, but it opened up communication for us. And that started on a whole
Did you get on the phone and start calling everybody?
Oh my gosh. My husband was out of town at a conference. I'd like called him up. I called my mom up. I'm like sending out emails. It was absolutely incredible. That was a moment when, after all the prayers, after all the crying out, after all of it, it was like something happened. Something happened. And
something major happened.
Something major happened. And it wasn't like, what you would call like this was the full miracle or something, but it was such a miracle.
Yes.
To get that and then to go on to have the first conversations with your child. But it was as time went on, I started realizing like, okay, wait a second, like he's talking about things of like heaven somehow. What is he describing here? And I didn't have a grid for what is it that he's talking about.
I've ever read.
It is absolutely out there. And, here I worked at a church and I'm going like, this is like challenging my whole grid. I don't even know who to talk to about this. This is like, can this even be? It's not like this kid's had like a near-death experience or whatever, but he's seeing things of heaven somehow. He's experiencing things. And then he's getting these wisdom words that are like, faith is picture it done. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's like the best description of faith I have ever heard. Faith is picture it done.
Yeah.
Or faith is believing for kites to fly when there's no wind in sight.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then it turned into poetry. Mm-hmm. And then it turned into these huge descriptions about things that he would see in his sleeping hours.
Those are my favorite. Tell me about this. Tell the audience about the sleeping hours.
Well,
it's my favorite. It's so descriptive.
It's a little hard to explain because essentially it's like he gets taken up in his spirit to see things in heaven. I mean,
to go to school.
God educates
and hang out.
Him in heaven. He meets people. He sees historical things from a spiritual point of view in heaven, and continues to this day. In fact, just the other day, he came home from school and he started writing about what I realized as he got into it. He was writing about 9/11, but I've never sat down and talked with him about 9/11.
Right.
But the way that he was
things on your plate.
Yeah, but the way that he was writing about it was more from a spiritual angle. So these are really
what did he say?
Well, it was just really interesting because he was talking about one plane and people were running and they're saying, oh my God, and then another plane. And then he was talking about how God deployed 2 major angels and there was more destruction that almost happened, but this, kept more destruction from happening. It was very detailed, but it was like, wow. Okay, why do you know this? Like how I still to this day, and there have been many things and many, quite honestly, like prophetic things that just spontaneously come about that are for people that I'll share with somebody and they're like, oh my gosh, that is exactly dead on.
Well, one of the examples I think of that is when you're at the mall.
Yeah, that is one of my favorite stories.
That gave me chills.
Yes.
So let's talk about, you're sitting at the mall, the mega mall of America.
Yeah, so Josiah actually was like, God says, take me to the Mall of America and he'll have a surprise for you there. I'm like, okay.
Sweet.
We get to go shopping. Okay,
unlimited
whatever.
rides.
So we're walking around and I get his hamburgers and I go have some salad and noodles. And then we always walk hand in hand. And all of a sudden he's like pulling me down kind of the corridor, and which is unusual for him. And I'm like, okay, he must be going to a place where there's toys or something. Like, so he's pulling me. He's about 8.5 by this point. He's pulling me. And then all of a sudden he sits on a bench and like sits me down and then like motions for my iPad. And so I take out my iPad. I'm like, what's going on? Because periodically, like if we're out and about, I'll like take out the iPad and we can converse, whatever.
Right.
But take out the iPad. And he goes on to basically tell me that there's this girl that I'm going to need to talk to. And I'm like...
She's a goth girl.
Well... It's weird because I do not see her. I don't see anybody who he's talking about. So he goes on and he writes this, that I'm going to have to hobnob with this girl. And I'm like, what girl? There's tons of girls. Like, we're at the Mall of America. Like, and he doesn't point, like typical kids would. So he goes on to write, love is love. Tell her that. Tell her words, take her breath away. Tell her that love is born out of choosing God, not choosing Wicca. Okay, he has no idea what Wicca is, which is like witchcraft.
Yeah.
Practicing like witchcraft. Hope is love, not more daddy issues. Pick a spiritual daddy. It is boy's father. It is God. Choose him, not a brotherhood of robbers, because you need me, God says. So...
What do you do with this at the Mall of America?
You got to picture this. So he's writing all this, and on the flip side of the app, and at this point, he's still writing everything like it all flows together with no spaces.
Right. So you've gotten really good at.
So I have to at this point, I have to decipher all this stuff. So I'm like, who are you even talking about? My heart's like pounding. I'm not going to have to tell somebody this. I'm just like, what is this? So I'm looking down, I'm looking around. I'm like, I don't even know who you'd be talking about. All of a sudden I look pretty far down, and there's this group of, I don't know, young 20-somethings. And one person has her back kind of to us far down. And it looks like there's kind of like this black, almost like shawl or drape cape or whatever. I'm like, oh, well, that must be who he's talking about. I'm like, Josiah, are we supposed to like go over there? I'm just like dying. So all of a sudden they start making their way around in front of my bench. They start walking in front of me, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's like now or never. So I stand up and I'm like, hi, excuse me. Can I just ask you a quick question? Are you very, excuse me, spiritually inclined? And she's like, I don't know. Yeah, I guess. And I'm like, my son, he has autism. He's very like connected to spiritual things. I know this is going to sound really weird, but I think he might have a word from you. Tell her what I just told you. I look up and I'm like, does that mean anything to you? She goes, no, not really. My heart just like sunk. And in that second, the girl next to her, who had this sunny, bright yellow tank top on, and she had a little cute blonde bob, says, that's not her, but that's me. And she takes her tank top and shows me a 5-point pentagram tattoo on her shoulder.
Oh, wow.
The star with the circle in it.
Yeah.
She said, I'm in Wicca, and I've been told I have daddy issues. And as you were reading that, I was just like getting so hot. Like, are you serious? And I'm like, okay, wow. Girl with the cape. I'm sorry. Like, that threw me off. Anyway, so I find out this girl's name is Sam. And so I'm like, okay, Sam, seriously, is this freaking you out right now? Because, okay, a mom and her autistic son are in the biggest mall of America, and God, like the God of the universe, like the God of the Bible, has moved heaven and earth, time and space, to somehow make us intersect to get a message to you.
Yeah.
I mean,
I got chills reading that part, because that is just...
And she goes, I don't really know what to do with this. She's like, I used to be Lutheran, but I haven't gone to church since like the 9th grade. I'm like,
sister, it's time.
Well, I ended up talking with her a little bit, and then just like, I didn't feel led to go much further than that, except to say, hey, can I send this to you? Can I get your email address? I'll send this to you. And kind of had a round of hugs, and I'm sure they thought I was completely crazy. I don't know whatever happened to her from there.
Happen.
I know. I mean, if anything, that changed my heart so much, because I thought, this is amazing to me how God, there's that story about how he'll leave the 99 to go get the one.
Yeah.
Even if you don't want him, even if you've rejected him,
yeah.
even if you are opposed to him,
yeah.
how he was reaching for her.
Yeah.
And so it reminds me of how many times are we actually nudged to reach out?
Nudged, like the Apple challenge.
Right. And that we don't.
Right.
So this was like slap across the face, obvious. But, walking with Josiah through life, it's really showed me that the things that we can't see are truly real.
Yeah.
And that we need to be more sensitive to the direction of the Spirit in our lives.
Right. So I would consider that an Apple challenge.
Yeah,
and
the
folks,
Apple Dare.
You'll learn more about this in the book. That I think I read that part over and over again, because I was just like, it just clicked. It made so much sense that this is what's been happening. So,
and you know, I almost didn't put that part in because, and I really wrestled with Cheryl Ricker, who wrote this book with me. She's masterful at telling, you know, moving the story along. I was like, we can't put that in. I mean, people are going to think this is way out there. She's like, you have to put it in. I'm like, I'm going to get pushback from this because this just sounds almost fantastical. But essentially, this is what's interesting is it's almost like things that, you know, things that are spiritual are often represented in things that are physical. And things that are physical often mirror what is spiritual. So, like, I think once we get that concept down and kind of reduce the fact that, like, it's not just all totally ethereal, flying around on clouds, you know, that kind of stuff. But there's real practical stuff. Like, all of heaven is oriented toward what's happening on earth until Jesus comes again. Like, it's what's going on with these people that God has decided to put his whole affection on, you know? So even those that have gone before us, their hearts are toward us still. It's not as big of a chasm as we think. Right. So the idea is that Josiah was telling about, like, there's these, he talks about it as being like an apple.
He makes everything so simple to understand. That is my favorite part of the whole thing, is it makes it so easy to understand and picture it in your mind and really embrace it.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Easy, but like profound.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's almost like an angel would get what's represented as an apple, because it's like, it's a dare that's like, when they are employed to come down here, it's almost like they come near us with something that is like, that God wants to nudge us toward to do. That could be to talk with somebody, that could be to start a business, that could be to, invent something, that, you know, there are just many things that we might actually know as a nudge inside of us. But if you could see in the spirit, it's almost like there's this, the way he describes it, like an angel will come and kind of present this apple dare. And we are either able to take it or we might not take it. If we don't take it, they'll go back with it. And what it represents is, if you take it, there's a sweetness that will come because of your choice to take it. Right. And growth and seeds, you know, that can then be planted and forwarded. But we don't have to take it. Right. That's our choice.
But it reminds me of what's the saying? If God will trust you, if he can trust you with the little things, then he will start giving you bigger things, right? Exactly. And I looked at the apple dare as kind of like, he'll present you with the, you know, the little apples just to see if you will take them. And if you do, then he'll bring you bigger apples, right?
Exactly.
And you'll expand who you are and your knowledge and your effect on the world. Right. Because he'll put great responsibility on you.
Right.
Like he has with you.
Right. Well, and I think that we often, you know, look back at the Garden of Eden, we often really look at that tree of the knowledge of good and evil that unfortunately, you know, Eve and Adam ate from. Right. Well, in that picture of the garden, there was also the tree of life. Yeah. And God continues to give us that as an option. Choose life. Yeah. Choose the fruit of life. Choose the fruits of the Spirit. Right. And employ them in your life. So to become sensitive to that, that has been really interesting to me.
So I want to go back to the apple dare, because I know we have another mutual friend, Sarah Olson, and I believe she got a really, really big apple.
Yes, indeed.
But for regular Joes who are out there, maybe they're not, you know, so ingrained in faith, and you know, they're doing the every holiday at church, right? They've never read the Bible. Yeah. But they're still good people, and they still believe in God, and they're just walking through life, and these little challenges come up to them of, you know, which way do you want to go? Yeah. And for me, when I was reading it, I was thinking, wow, there's so many people out there that, because I help so many business owners, I start noticing the apples that
Sure.
They're being offered because they
Right.
come to me and they're like, well, I have a couple choices.
Exactly.
And I just sit there and go, oh my gosh, you were given an apple. You need to take the apple.
Yeah. Well, and honestly, everything in this world that perpetuates life
Yeah.
and love and goodness is from God. Every perfect good gift comes from
beautiful.
God. He's the good
Yeah.
gift giver, right?
Yep.
So whether you want to acknowledge that as being from God or not,
Right.
it doesn't mean that he's not still the author of every good and perfect
Right.
gift.
Right. I think this was one of my apple dares, you know, because most podcasts, business podcasts,
Sure.
don't talk about faith, don't talk about supernatural,
Yeah.
that angels are like in this room with us right now, just hanging out, waiting for us to ask them for something because they just want to help us.
Yeah, exactly.
I learned that in here.
Yeah.
This book is it. When I went back and I talked to Penny, we had lunch after I had read the book, and I couldn't stop talking about it. I'm like, it's a game changer. It's such a game changer. It's amazing how it just broke it down for me in the simplest ways, but it was so profound that I was getting goosebumps almost every chapter. I was like, seriously, like when I read about your house. Mm-hmm. Maybe we should explain
like
to
the
people.
mansion?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, what your house in heaven, you know, you hear about mansions in heaven or whatever. He has a chapter in there where he talks about, this is what's beautiful. It's like your personality, what you love the most, what you've loved the most in this life is all represented in a huge way in your house.
Yeah. What gave me chills is when he explained that he got a glimpse of your house
Yeah.
that's being built.
Right.
And he mentioned, what is it, a doll? Was it a cradle?
It
or
was
is
a doll that my mother had
Okay.
made me when I was little. Is like a duplicate is in the house.
And he would never know that.
No, he didn't. I've never shared that with him. See, those are the kind of things like he'll come out with stuff and I'm like, how do you know that?
Right.
It's I can't even explain it to this day, but it happens a lot. It happens so often. And it's not ever in a leading way.
Yeah.
It's always a spontaneous thing. I don't push him in any way. You know, some people have been like, "Oh, does Josiah have a word for me or
Right.
whatever?" I don't ever do that. I if anything is going to come that is of note,
Yeah.
it has to be spontaneous, or I feel like it's not authentic.
Right. Right.
And then it has to be confirmed by the person. But God is active, God is alive, and he wants to intersect with our lives if we'll let him.
Right.
And as a person myself of faith, I realized that there were a lot of things I had to unlearn to just be able to even embrace the fact that he is near and he is guiding and he's close, even in the most difficult times when we've given up hope and we think like the circumstances are about to envelop us and take us down. Man, I just got to say, hold on.
Yeah.
We're in a war,
Yeah.
and there really is, you know, all that is good and for life and all that wants to tear you down and just
Right.
put you on the mat. We've got to hold on and we've got to keep investing in things that bring goodness to this world.
Right. So, okay. Now, I'm sure that you've had plenty of naysayers and plenty of critics, right? So the last couple of minutes, I want to address those, right? Because I was telling my dad about this, and he was like, "No, that could never happen." I'm like, "You have to read it to understand because it's so there's so much detail in here that you cannot." I don't feel like anybody who reads this book walks away feeling like it's all made up, right? You actually.
Well, and by the way, I'm not a weirdo person. Like, I actually have people in my life that can vouch for me. So
It's a beautiful book. But the other thing that I want to ask you, because being on this journey with my own son, is we've been trying different nutritional things. We've been trying some homeopathic stuff. Did you? I'm sure you dabbled in it. But what kinds of things have you dabbled in?
we've done
Everything.
We've done a
Her
lot
face is
of,
everything.
we've done a lot of things. We've done a lot of biomedical treatments, vitamin stuff, hyperbaric oxygen chamber,
Really?
40 dives of that. We've done, we've done a little bit of homeopathic stuff, So yeah, we've tried a lot of things.
Yeah. And how is he doing today?
Well,
He's painting. You were telling me.
he began painting some really beautiful things this summer, but he continues to express himself through poetry very beautifully. If you go to Josiah's Fire on Facebook,
Yep.
you can see that we post almost. It's an outlet for him. There's still the symptoms of autism and plus puberty that have been really challenging. But he's going to be 13 next month, and he's a beautiful kid, and we have our challenges all the time, and it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you what, I am so glad that we are just investing in like the gifts that God's given him and moving out from there, because I think that it breaks the limits off of these kids when we look at their gifts, not their deficits.
That was going to be my last question, is all these kids that have been diagnosed with autism, special needs. I mean, it's the largest number ever.
It is. Yeah.
What do you think is happening here? What?
Oh,
I mean, because we talked about
that's $1 million question. There's certainly a lot of
because Josiah
things
said he wasn't the only child that was going up there.
Oh, right. And actually, I've met a lot of people since the book came out that are like, your story is our story. And I'm like, what? Are you kidding me? And so there's been such...
But they haven't accepted the apple to let people know that they're...
Well, they're doing it in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
Some people are starting schools. Some people are doing things in their own community in different ways. And a lot of it, too, is just encouraging one another in it. But these kids need to be, a lot of it is taking our blinders off and who we think that they are and help them get their identity.
Right.
And so that they're not even oppressed and depressed by the fact that they're not able to communicate like the rest of us.
Or act normally, so to speak. Because they're on a whole different playing field.
They need to be celebrated and certainly life spoken over them.
Yeah. I love that. I am so thankful that you could come down and spend time with me.
I've loved it.
It has been an honor talking to you during this half an hour. And I hope that you come back again. But before you go, we have Josiah's Fire, the book. These are all on Amazon.
Those two are, yes.
Yep. And then we have The Good Gift Giver. Why don't you talk about this a little bit?
That's just, we've taken some of Josiah's, our favorite quotes from Josiah, and just done some devotionals, just short, for 40 days, looking through and saying, how can I reflect on this and how can I apply it to my life? So
I love that. And then we have a video.
Those are 3 CDs.
3 CDs.
I did a sermon series, and that one's actually only available when I speak at the moment.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
This is fabulous. Thank you so much.
And we hope to be writing another book soon, too, called Josiah's Invitation. So.
And what is that going to be about?
It will be the continuing saga, and it will be more about from thematic viewpoint of things that Josiah has revealed. And there's so much more to tell. So.
I can't wait. Yeah. And when will that be coming out?
I don't know yet. Probably next fall.
Okay.
Yep.
josiahsfire.com.
Yep.
They can go to the website.
Yep.
They can connect with you on Facebook.
Yes. Josiah's Fire on Facebook is our most active place right now.
Or just Google it, Josiah's Fire. You'll pop right up.
Yep.
Thank you again.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate it. And thank you. If you love this episode as much as I did, click like or share, and we'll see you next time. Thank you so much. Have a great day.